Have you ever wondered what really happens when you complain to HR? You might think HR is there to protect you. After all, they talk about employee support, workplace fairness, open communication, and creating a healthy work environment. But here's the uncomfortable truth. HR works for the company, not for you. And before you misunderstand what that means, let me be clear. This doesn't mean every HR professional is against employees. It doesn't mean HR is evil, and it certainly doesn't mean you should never talk to HR. It means something much simpler. HR is a function of the organization. They are hired by the organization, paid by the organization, and their responsibility is to help the organization manage its people, policies, risks, and workplace problems. That means when you walk into an HR office with a serious complaint, the conversation isn't simply about whether you feel hurt or angry. HR is also thinking about the company, what happened, what evidence exists, what policy might apply, who else is involved, what risk does this create for the organization, and what does the company need to do next. That changes the way you should approach HR. Because if you treat HR like your personal best friend, you may say things you later regret. But if you understand how HR actually works, you can communicate more strategically, protect your credibility, and protect your career. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We'll look at who HR actually protects, what HR is really looking for when you make a complaint, what you should think twice about saying, why documentation matters, and how smart employees communicate with HR without unnecessarily putting themselves at risk. And if you want more videos about workplace psychology, office politics, career protection, and the hidden rules of corporate life, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. First, let's answer the biggest question. Who does HR actually work for? The answer is the organization. That sounds obvious, but many employees forget it. Think about it. An HR professional is an employee of the company. The company pays their salary. The company gives them their responsibilities, and the company expects them to help manage the workforce and reduce organizational problems. That means HR has to balance several different things: employee concerns, management concerns, company policies, legal and regulatory requirements, workplace culture, performance issues, and business risk. So when you tell HR, my manager is treating me unfairly, HR usually can't simply say, your manager's wrong, we're going to fix everything for you. They need to understand what actually happened. What did your manager say? When did it happen? Was anyone else there? Do you have an email? Has this happened before? Was a company policy violated? Did management already address the situation? What outcome are you asking for? Those are the kinds of questions that turn an emotional complaint into a workplace issue that can actually be evaluated. And this is the first mindset shift you need to make. HR doesn't necessarily operate around your feelings. HR operates around facts, policies, risk, and the interests of the organization. Now, that doesn't mean your feelings don't matter. They can absolutely matter. But if you want HR to take a workplace problem seriously, you need to explain the situation in a way that can actually be understood and investigated. For example, imagine you walk into HR and say, my boss hates me. That may genuinely be how you feel. But what can HR do with that statement? It's difficult to investigate someone's feelings or intentions. Now imagine saying, over the last 3 weeks, my manager has given me 3 different sets of instructions for the same project. I have emails showing each change, and I'd like clarification about the expected process. That is completely different. The first statement is an interpretation. The second statement is a documented workplace issue, and that distinction is extremely important because facts are easier for HR to act on than assumptions. Now let's talk about something else. HR is not necessarily your enemy. This is where a lot of people misunderstand the entire subject. Saying that HR isn't on your side does not mean HR is against you. In many situations, HR can actually be one of the most useful resources inside a company. HR can help employees understand company policies. They can assist with benefits and leave. They can handle workplace complaints. They can investigate serious misconduct. They can help with harassment or discrimination concerns. They can explain performance procedures. They can help resolve workplace conflicts, and they can sometimes step in when a manager or department is creating serious problems. The mistake is expecting HR to automatically take your side. Imagine two employees are having a conflict. Employee A says, employee B is the problem. Employee B says, employee A is the problem. HR can't simply choose the person they personally like. Their responsibility is to understand the situation and determine what the organization should do. That's why you should stop thinking about HR as your workplace friend. Instead, think of HR as part of the company's system. And once you understand that, your communication becomes much more strategic. You don't need HR to like you. You need to communicate clearly. You need to be credible. You need to explain what happened. And you need to understand what you want to happen next. That brings us to another important point. What is HR actually looking for when you make a complaint? When employees go to HR, they often think the main question is, does HR believe me? But HR may be asking several questions at the same time. What happened? When did it happen? Is there evidence? Are there witnesses? Has this happened before? Is there a pattern? What policies might apply? What did the manager or company already do? And what risk does this situation create for the organization? This is why documentation becomes so important. Let's say you tell HR, my boss constantly humiliates me. That's difficult to evaluate. But imagine you say, on March 4th, during a team meeting, my manager criticized my work in front of 6 employees. On March 11th, a similar incident happened. I have the meeting notes, and 2 co-workers were present. Now, HR has something concrete. There is a date. There is an event. There are possible witnesses, and there may be documentation. You don't need to exaggerate. You don't need to make your manager sound like a villain. And you don't need to create a dramatic story. You simply need to explain what happened. Because the strongest workplace complaint isn't always the most emotional one. It's often the one that is specific, consistent, and supported by evidence. Now here's one of the biggest mistakes employees make when dealing with HR. They say too much. They walk into the meeting angry. They've been thinking about the problem for weeks, and suddenly everything comes out. My manager is incompetent. My coworkers are lazy. The company is completely unfair. Everyone hates the boss. They're trying to get me fired. My manager has always been against me. And now, HR has to separate the actual facts from everything else. That's why you should prepare before you talk. Ask yourself 3 simple questions. First, what actually happened? Not what you think happened. Not what you believe someone's intention was. What actually happened? Second, what evidence do you have? Do you have emails, messages, meeting notes, dates, documents, witnesses, performance, records? And third, what outcome are you asking for? Do you want clarification? Do you want an investigation? Do you want an explanation of company policy? Do you want a formal complaint to be recorded? Or are you simply asking for guidance? If you know the answers to these 3 questions, your conversation becomes much more professional, and that can completely change how your situation is perceived. Now let's talk about something many employees misunderstand. Confidentiality. Never automatically assume that everything you tell HR will remain completely secret. HR may handle sensitive information carefully. They may have confidentiality obligations, but confidentiality does not always mean absolute secrecy. If you report a serious workplace issue, the company may need to investigate. That could mean talking to your manager, speaking with witnesses, reviewing documents, looking at company records, or involving other people who need to know. So if you're about to share something sensitive, it's reasonable to ask questions. You can ask, who will have access to this information? You can ask, what happens after I make this report? You can ask, what information can remain confidential and what information may need to be shared? Those are reasonable questions, and asking them doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you informed, because once information enters a formal workplace process, you should understand that the company may need to act on it. And if you're reporting something serious, don't try to manipulate the process. Don't invent evidence. Don't exaggerate. Don't encourage coworkers to create a false story. Stick to what you know. Your credibility is one of the most valuable assets you have at work. And once that credibility is damaged, it can be difficult to rebuild. Now, here's an interesting part that many employees don't think about. The fact that HR protects the company can sometimes work in your favor. Think about what companies want to avoid. They want to avoid serious legal problems. They want to avoid regulatory problems. They want to reduce employee turnover. They want consistent policies. They want managers to follow proper procedures. They want workplace issues handled appropriately. They They want to avoid situations that create serious organizational risk. So, if your complaint identifies a legitimate problem that could affect the organization, HR has a reason to take it seriously. Imagine a manager repeatedly violates a company policy. One employee reports it. HR may investigate because the company needs to know whether that manager is creating a broader organizational problem. This is why you shouldn't approach HR thinking, "I need HR to like me." Instead, think, "I need to communicate clearly enough that the organization understands the issue." That is a much stronger position. You're not begging someone to protect you. You're presenting information that the organization needs to understand. And that changes the power dynamic. Now let's talk about the language you use, because the words you choose can make a huge difference. Imagine saying, "My boss is a narcissist who wants me to fail." Now compare that with, "My manager has repeatedly changed project expectations after deadlines were agreed upon." And I have 4 examples documented. Which statement is easier to investigate? Obviously, the second. That's because professional communication separates behavior from interpretation. Instead of saying, "He hates me," say, "He stopped including me in meetings that are directly related to my responsibilities." Instead of saying, "She's trying to get me fired," say, "I've received 3 written warnings for issues that were previously considered acceptable, and I'd like clarification about the performance expectations." Instead of saying, "Everyone knows he's unfair," say, "2 other team members have experienced similar situations, and I have specific examples." Do you see the difference? You're not trying to sound dramatic. You're trying to sound credible. And credibility matters because when you communicate calmly and specifically, you're giving the other person something they can actually work with. Now let's talk about the things smart employees avoid when dealing with HR. First, they don't lie. This should be obvious, but it's incredibly important. If your story changes, your credibility can collapse. Second, they don't exaggerate. If you turn every disagreement into a major accusation, people may eventually question your judgment. Third, they don't threaten HR statements like, "If you don't fix this, I'll destroy the company." Don't strengthen your position. They create another problem. Fourth, they don't gossip about an investigation. If HR is handling a sensitive issue, spreading rumors throughout the office can make the situation much worse. And fifth, smart employees don't rely entirely on memory. If something important happens, keep appropriate records, keep dates, keep relevant emails, keep important instructions, keep performance feedback, keep records of major decisions, not because you should live in fear and not because you should secretly record everything that happens at work, but because memories change. People remember conversations differently, and workplace situations can become complicated very quickly. Good documentation isn't paranoia, it's professional self-protection. Now you might be wondering, when should you actually go to HR? Because after hearing all of this, you might think the safest option is to avoid HR completely. That's not the lesson. There are situations where involving HR is absolutely appropriate. Serious harassment, discrimination, threats, retaliation, unsafe working conditions, wage or payroll problems, serious policy violations, or behavior that could put employees or the organization at significant risk. In situations like these, don't try to become your own investigator. Don't retaliate against the person. Don't create a secret campaign against your manager. Don't manipulate coworkers into supporting your story. Use the appropriate company process. When you report the issue, be clear, explain what happened, provide relevant evidence, identify witnesses when appropriate, and explain what outcome you're looking for. The goal isn't to destroy someone. The goal is to make sure the problem is properly addressed. And that brings us to the real strategy. The lesson isn't that HR is evil, and the lesson isn't that you should never trust HR. The real lesson is this: understand the role HR plays before you decide how to communicate with them. HR protects the organization, so you should protect yourself through professionalism, documentation, credibility, and clear communication. Don't walk into HR trying to make them your best friend Walk in prepared. Don't tell them what you think someone intended. Tell them what actually happened. Don't exaggerate. Don't lie. Don't threaten. And don't assume. Confidentiality means absolute secrecy. Instead, be factual, be calm, be specific, and know what outcome you're asking for. Because workplace, power isn't always about who has the loudest voice. Sometimes it's about who understands the system. The smartest employees aren't necessarily the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who understand how the workplace actually works. HR may not be your personal advocate, but HR can still be an important resource when you understand its role and communicate strategically. So, the next time you walk into that HR office, don't ask yourself, are they on my side? Ask yourself, how do I communicate this in a way that protects my career and puts the facts on the record? Because once you understand the rules behind the system, you stop reacting emotionally and you start playing the game strategically. If you found this video useful, subscribe to the channel for more videos about workplace psychology, office politics, career protection, and the hidden rules that control your career. And remember, you don't need everyone at work to be on your side. You need to understand how the system works.